A quiet Saturday afternoon cast a golden glow over the town of Riverton, where life moved slowly and gently, like the breeze drifting through the trees lining the streets. Amid the modest porches, a 13-year-old black boy, Elijah Brooks, was hurrying along the cobbled streets, clutching a small frayed wallet. His eyes sparkled, his heart beat fast, not from exhaustion, but from anticipation. He was going to buy a gift, not an iPad, not an expensive doll, just a tiny silver bracelet with a few heart and star-shaped charms. The kind of thing he was certain would make his little sister Ariana, who was about to turn 10, scream with delight when she opened her birthday present. Elijah hadn't asked his mother for money. He didn't ask anyone to buy it for him. He had been washing glasses, wiping tables, and serving drinks for 3 months at Parker's Cafe. Every tip was carefully folded and stored in a tin box. He counted every penny like a grown man caring for his little family. That bracelet was sitting in the display case of the most luxurious jewelry store in town, Belmont Jewelers. He stood for hours outside that glass window, staring at it like a distant miracle. Today, finally, Elijah had enough money, and he was here not to beg or apologize for his dream. He came to buy it with dignity. And in his young heart, there was no space for defensiveness, no notion of the danger that might be waiting behind that glass door, only eagerness and a pure, innocent love he wanted to give his sister. The glass door of Belmont Jewelers swung open, releasing a soft, metallic chime, crisp and clear, like glasses clinking in a fine dining restaurant. Elijah stepped in, careful to make sure his footsteps weren't too hurried nor too hesitant, just as his mother had taught him when you walk into any place. Walk as if you have every right to be there. Inside, the air was cool and filled with the scent of luxury perfume mixed with the polish of fine wood. Rows of gleaming glass cases reflected the ceiling lights like precious stones. On shelves of black velvet lay all kinds of sparkling necklaces, rings and watches arranged like works of art not meant for ordinary hands. Elijah walked toward one of the cases, his heart pounding. He had spotted the little silver bracelet he adored, sitting between 2 pieces of far more expensive jewelry, like a small star in a sky full of lights. But then, the silence broke as he heard the sound of high heels approaching. A white woman, probably in her early 50s, with wavy blonde hair and meticulously applied makeup, was walking toward him. On the chest of her expensive shirt was a name tag, Margaret Whitmore, store manager. Her eyes swept over Elijah from head to toe, as if examining a package that had just fallen off a truck. A grey hoodie unzipped to reveal a clean polo shirt underneath neat jeans and sneakers that, though not new, had been carefully cleaned before he came in. In an instant, her eyes turned cold and sharp. Elijah sensed a slight shift immediately, but enough to make the air feel a few degrees colder. Her smile didn't come. Her voice rang out dry and flat. "What do you need here?" Elijah swallowed. He hadn't been taught how to deal with a look like that, but he knew he had to stay polite. He pointed toward the glass case. "I'd like to see that silver bracelet for my little sister's birthday." Mrs. Margaret raised an eyebrow slightly. Silence settled between them, thick like a glass wall. Then she slowly nodded, not looking at him for even a second. "That one's quite expensive. Are you sure you want to see it?" Her tone wasn't advisory. It was used to test someone she suspected. Elijah took a deep breath, his hand brushing the wallet in his jacket pocket. He pressed his lips together, then nodded. "I have the money. I saved all summer." Elijah pulled the wallet from his jacket pocket and opened it carefully. The bills inside were folded neatly and perfectly flat, as if each represented a small victory. He held the wallet out toward Mrs. Margaret, not to boast, but to prove that he hadn't come here to do anything wrong. "I saved up," he said softly, his voice calm, just as his mother had taught him. "I work at Parker's Cafe every day after school." Mrs. Margaret tilted her head slightly, her eyes scanning the money, but her expression showed no hint of reassurance. On the contrary, her lips tightened. Her long, slender fingers tapped the glass counter, slowly, rhythmically, and with visible irritation. "Oh," she sneered. "A 13-year-old boy, working part-time. And you've saved enough to buy a silver bracelet from this jewelry store." The question wasn't meant to be answered. It was like a sharp, cold, and deliberate knife carving into Elijah's pride. Elijah gently squeezed the wallet in his hand. "I'm not lying." he replied, not lowering his head, his gaze still steady. I worked hard. I want to buy a nice gift for my little sister. Mrs. Margaret didn't respond. She let out a soft snort of contempt, almost like a laugh. Then she leaned in slightly, her voice lowering but growing sharper. And you think, just having money means you can walk in here without suspicion? Elijah felt his cheeks flush, not from embarrassment, but from a quiet rage rising inside him. But he held it in. He remembered his mother's words. Staying calm doesn't mean you're weak. It shows that you are stronger than the ignorance thrown at you. He clenched his fist, then let it go. I just want to see the bracelet, he said slowly. I didn't come here to cause trouble. It was then that Mrs. Margaret finally turned and opened the display case. Fine, she said, her voice sounding like she indulged a stubborn child. But be careful, that bracelet is worth more than you probably earn in a year. Elijah didn't respond. He nodded and reached out to receive the bracelet from the black velvet tray. He had no idea that a small moment, a sudden slip, would turn his entire world upside down in just a few seconds. The silver bracelet felt cool in Elijah's palm, delicate and shimmering under the spotlights. He turned it gently, admiring the tiny charms glittering like stars stitched into a child's dream. He imagined his sister's eyes, Ariana, when she put it on her wrist for the first time. He saw her smile, awkward hug, and joyful squeal. Elijah, I can't believe it. But then, a slight slip. His fingertip, damp with sweat, without noticing, caused the bracelet to slip through his grasp like a dream falling away. Clink. A slight sound rang out, metal hitting glass, then rolling onto the bright white tile floor like a spotlighted stage. Everything went silent. In less than a second, Elijah froze and his heart skipped a beat. He bent down, intending to pick up the bracelet when, oh my God, I knew it. Mrs. Margaret's shrill scream tore through the air. Every head in the store turned sharply in their direction. She pointed directly at Elijah. Her face flushed, whether from fury or a carefully rehearsed setup, it was hard to tell. You were going to shove it in your pocket, right? I saw it. I knew from the start. You weren't here for anything decent. Elijah was stunned. He hadn't even had time to speak before Margaret rushed to the phone behind the counter, dialing with lightning speed. Call the police right now, she screamed into the receiver. A black kid wearing a hoodie trying to steal in the store. He's still here, pretending to be innocent. Elijah stood frozen. The air inside the store hardened like freshly formed ice. The woman across the counter clutched her purse more tightly. A man stepped back, eyeing Elijah warily like a wild animal about to pounce. He wanted to speak. He wanted to shout, I didn't do it, I just dropped it. But he knew. No one wanted to hear the truth from a 13-year-old black boy. Not when the accusation had already been shouted with certainty from a blonde woman in designer clothes standing behind a polished glass display. He stood there motionless. Because Elijah knew. One wrong move and everything could turn into a tragic ending. The sirens blared, piercingly prolonged, as if they were screaming in place of the justice that had just been distorted. From afar, flashing red and blue lights reflected across the store's glass facade. Elijah stood still, his whole body tensed. His fingers twitched by his side, but he didn't dare move. Every word his mother had ever told him spun through his mind. Don't react. Don't raise your hands. Don't shout. Keep your eyes steady. You're just a child, but in their eyes you've never only been that. The door burst open. 2 officers stepped inside. One older, taller, with graying hair and an icy expression. His chest tag read, Senior Officer Donald Blake. The other, younger, eyes sharp but not yet fully hardened, was named Officer Ethan Doyle. There, that's him, Margaret shouted like someone who had just uncovered tax fraud. He tried to hide the bracelet. I caught him in the act. Blake didn't ask a thing. He didn't look at the bracelet on the ground. He didn't question Elijah at all. He reached toward his handcuffs, voice stern and firm. Put your hands up. Let me see your hands. Elijah swallowed hard. His hand twitched slightly, not to resist, but because he was trembling. I didn't do anything wrong. His voice was small but clear. Doyle hesitated. He glanced at the bracelet on the floor, then looked into the boy's eyes. In those eyes there was no panic of a guilty child, only silent pain and a kind of injustice far too familiar. I dropped it, Elijah said, this time a little choked. I just wanted to buy a birthday present for my sister. Blake didn't wait. He stepped closer, tightening the cuffs in his hand. "You can explain at the station." "Wait," Doyle spoke up softly, but just enough to make Blake pause. "We haven't checked the camera." Margaret immediately shot back. "What are you doubting me now?" A black kid wearing a hoodie with cash in hand drops the bracelet, then denies it. "What more do you need?" It's obvious Elijah said nothing more because he knew any words now would just be twisted. He stared at the towering officer preparing to cuff him, who didn't even bother to ask, "Are you okay?" And in that moment, Elijah knew he was no longer just a boy, not in their eyes, not in this room. Elijah lifted his head. His eyes, though red, looked straight ahead. Though shaking his hand, reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Not rushing and not panicking, not provoking. Blake frowned. "What are you doing?" "I'm calling my mum," Elijah replied, his voice small but steady. Margaret let out a mocking laugh. "Oh, let me guess, your mum's a lawyer or a civil rights activist. You gonna tell her the cops are being racist?" Elijah didn't respond. He just brought the phone to his ear, his voice lowering as if trying to press down every emotion. "Mum, I'm at Belmont Jewelers. They're saying I stole something. Can you come?" He didn't need to say anything more. That one sentence was enough. Just a few minutes later, the door flew open, heels clicked steadily across the tile floor, each step echoed like the cold drumbeat of truth about to be revealed. A black woman entered, tall, commanding, dressed in a navy blue suit, her presence decisive, like a modern-day general. In her hand was a badge that didn't even need to be explained. Its very presence shifted the air. "I'm to Olivia Brooks, Chief of Police City of Riverton." No one could speak. Once full of prejudice, suspicion, and unchecked authority, the room became silent like a cathedral at midnight. Every eye turned to the woman who entered like a thunderstorm, but without wind, only a chilling calm slicing the air with absolute composure. Then her gaze turned toward Elijah. "This is my son." Blake froze. The hand still holding the handcuffs quickly withdrew as if he had touched a live wire. Doyle looked at Margaret, then at Elijah, then at Olivia Brooks. In his eyes was a dawning awareness. And Margaret, her face contorted. Her lips trembled not from fear, but from shock, because the boy she had just accused wasn't just a black kid in a hoodie. He was the son of the city's most powerful law enforcement official. And now, every word she had spoken, glance, and assumption was preparing to wrap around and choke her. No one spoke, no excuses. Not a single cough. The entire store fell into silence as Olivia Brooks walked straight to the center of the room like a storm that had been held back too long. Her eyes didn't need to narrow, but each glance sent shivers. She stared directly at Officer Blake with a gaze devoid of emotion, carrying only one message: "I'm waiting for an explanation." Blake swallowed dryly, still holding the now absurd pair of handcuffs. "We received a call about a theft," he said, voice stiff and brittle. "We were just following protocol." Olivia tilted her head, her gaze sharp as a blade slicing through layers of excuses. "Protocol. You enter a store, see a black boy standing near an item dropped on the floor, and reach for your cuffs without asking a question. Whose protocol is that? From what era? 1960? She didn't need to raise her voice. Her tone was steady, low, but heavy as lead pressing on everyone's chest. Margaret suddenly lashed out, trying to reclaim the upper hand. I was just doing what's right. I saw him try to take the bracelet. I called the police because I couldn't let him get away." Olivia turned, facing Margaret directly. Each word shot out like a blade forged in cold steel. "That boy has a name, Elijah. And he worked all summer to buy a small gift for his little sister. That boy did not steal. He didn't shout, didn't resist, didn't insult anyone. But you screamed, made up a story, framed a crime, and called the police saying a black kid is stealing. Do you understand how dangerous those words are in this society?" Margaret opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no words to defend herself for the first time since all this began. But Olivia wasn't done. "I want to see the security footage, right now." Blake paused, then looked at Doyle standing near the counter. Doyle nodded. There was no way out. They pulled the footage and rewound. Every eye turned to the small screen behind the counter. And then, Frame by frame, it played like slaps to the face of every prejudiced thought in the room. Elijah is entering the store politely. Elijah is pointing to ask to see the bracelet. Elijah showed his money to prove he could pay. Elijah was holding the bracelet and accidentally dropped it. No suspicious behavior, no sneaky movements, no guilty glances. Nothing but a 13-year-old black boy trying to do something kind and being crushed by a world that treats kindness as if it doesn't belong in a body with dark skin. The room fell into a thick, heavy silence. Doyle let out a slow sigh, eyes cast to the floor. Blake said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Margaret had gone pale, as if realizing that the entire worldview she'd built on prejudice had just collapsed beneath her feet. Olivia didn't smile. She wasn't here to win. She was here to make the truth visible and show her son he wasn't alone. Now she said, voice still calm, but no longer restrained, "I want to know who among you will apologize first." No one responded. No one dared to face her, and that was the final proof that they knew they were wrong, but still didn't have the strength to do what was right. Silence. A silence is not born from respect, but from cowardice. The footage ended. The truth was laid bare. Elijah did not steal. He had done nothing wrong. No lies, no suspicious behavior as they had tried to claim. He was just a 13-year-old boy with love for his sister and a silver bracelet that now everyone knew he truly deserved. But the room remained frozen. Blake, the man who had nearly cuffed a child, stood still, his hand clenched, eyes turned away as if he couldn't bear to face the consequences of his actions. Doyle, the only one who had hesitated, looked down at the floor, lips tight, but still said nothing. He could have stopped this earlier, but he didn't. And Margaret, the blonde woman with stiff makeup, no longer held her composure. Her face was drained of color, but her lips didn't move. Not a single "I'm sorry," not even a lowered head, not one admission of guilt. She stepped back as if trying to disappear from the room she had once dominated. Elijah stood among them. No one touched him, no one spoke to him, no one looked at him like a child who needed protection after the storm he had just endured. And that moment was the deepest cut. No one called him by name, no one acknowledged they were wrong, not one apology, not even a brief one. Only averted eyes, and the pounding of Elijah's heart in his chest, reminding him that justice doesn't always look like it does in the textbooks. He looked around quietly. At the adults in powerheads, bowed not from remorse but shame at being exposed. At the customers who had turned their backs on him, now pretending to be absorbed in their phones as if they hadn't been there. Elijah didn't need comforting words. He didn't need anyone to pat him on the back. He just wanted once for someone to say, "You were mistreated, and we're sorry." But he knew that wouldn't come, because they were used to staying silent when the truth no longer served them. Olivia stepped forward and placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "Let's go, Elijah," she said, her voice soft but hard as steel. "I'm here now. I saw it all." Elijah said nothing. He turned one last time, his eyes locked with Margaret's, who stood behind the counter as if she were the victim. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to insult. He spoke just one sentence, quiet as a breath, but enough to choke the whole room. "I just wanted to buy a bracelet." But apparently, that was too much for some people here. Then he turned. No slumped shoulders, no bowed head, no fear in his step. 13 years old, Elijah Brooks walked out of Belmont Jewelers as if he had aged a decade in one afternoon. In the car, Elijah sat in the passenger seat. His hands rested on his thighs, clenching then releasing. His face turned toward the window, but his eyes were drifting. Olivia sat behind the wheel, silent for a few seconds, her grip on the steering wheel so tight it left impressions in her skin. She wasn't someone who got emotional easily. Still, this anger wasn't just about Elijah. It was about what Elijah represented: thousands of other children who had been accused, broken, and then abandoned. She reached for her phone. Dialed. The line picked up after 3 rings. Cynthia Olivia said, her voice no longer that of a mother, but that of a police chief preparing to issue a command. "I need a press release, immediately." Pause. Then she continued each sentence like a nail hammered into wood, subject the incident at Belmont Jewelers. "I want a full internal investigation into the 911 call placed today and the procedural misconduct of Officer Blake. A beat of silence. Then she added, "I also want an official statement from the department on racial bias in incident response and the abuse of authority in civilian encounters." Her voice dropped lower but stayed firm, and don't forget. In the public report, I want Margaret Whitmore's name mentioned clearly. Elijah turned to look at his mother, his eyes mixed with surprise and confusion. "You're going to make this a big deal?" Olivia turned to him, meeting his eyes directly. Her tone was calm but not soft. "You think I would let this go, after watching them treat you like some threat that needed to be restrained?" Elijah swallowed. He'd seen too many stories like this online, viral posts, angry hashtags, and then everything would fade within a week. The people who made false accusations rarely faced consequences, but this time felt different. This time, his mother had the power, and she wasn't afraid of the system because she was part of it, and she knew how to flip it from the inside. Olivia pulled the phone away and ended the call. She leaned back in her seat, still staring toward the store they had just left, where the wrongdoers stood, trying to erase their tracks. "Justice," she said quietly, "isn't an apology, it's action." Elijah didn't respond, but something stirred in his chest, not satisfaction, but the feeling that this time, he didn't have to carry it alone. 3 days later, Belmont Jewelers was no longer a quiet little jewelry store on the corner. It had become a trending name. Across morning broadcasts, social media, and evening news headlines, the story led with bold titles. "Police Chief Speaks Out After Racial Incident Against 13-Year-Old Black Boy." "Hampered Justice for Elijah Community." "Outraged by Belmont Jewelers, the boy who didn't stay silent, and the mother who made the system bow." TV stations played the surveillance footage over and over again. Elijah was walking into the store, offering cash, accidentally dropping the bracelet, and then being accused before he could even speak. No need for commentary, no narration. The images said everything. And that was what shocked viewers. Because the wrong didn't come from what he did, it came from a thought that had been legalized through a glance and empowered by authority. Belmont Jewelers' Yelp page collapsed overnight. Hundreds of one-star reviews flooded in like a tidal wave. Users weren't just furious at Margaret Whitmore's actions, but enraged by the store management's silence after the truth had been exposed. Margaret was placed on indefinite leave, but everyone knew it was just a polite phrase for a quiet dismissal. Internal Affairs launched an official investigation into Officer Donald Blake. The initial report revealed he had not requested verification of the scene before initiating restraint. Bodycam footage showed he hadn't asked Elijah, a 13-year-old boy, a single question before reaching for the handcuffs. In a country full of accidental cases this time, no one was buying the excuses anymore. Elijah sat on the couch, eyes glued to his phone. News about him flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. He saw pictures of himself, the grey hoodie, worn-out shoes, his face still boyish and unbroken by age, surrounded by the hashtag #Elijah deserved better. He didn't know exactly what he felt. Not pride, not joy. Just one thing: relief that people had seen, had heard, and didn't stay silent. He put the phone down. Beside him, his little sister Ariana swung her wrist with her new silver bracelet. She turned to him with a beaming smile. "Elijah, it sparkles." He forced a smile. His mom had returned to the store, not because they needed Belmont, but because she wanted Ariana to have the gift Elijah had worked for all summer. "I picked it," Elijah whispered. "And Mom bought it for me," Ariana added, then hugged him tightly. "That's enough, right?" she said innocently. Elijah looked at her, then out into the distance. Maybe she was right. There wasn't a perfect ending. But there was truth, there was action, and some people refused to let it be buried.